61-year-old building, so we're going to live test the beams underneath the floor here with all these people in it. But my name is Bill Briska. I'm the current president of the Historical Society, the Elgin History Museum. And of course, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today. And those that came for Mr. L's 100th birthday, you're too early. So, and those that came for his 90th, you're technically one day early. But we're going to do it today because tomorrow's another day. So here's how we're going to do this. We have a lot of people here, a lot of people that could say stuff for hours and hours and hours, but we don't have enough chairs for people to say stuff for hours and hours and hours. So we're going to have 3 or 4 people, We're going to say a few things that hopefully will summarize what all of you are feeling and thinking. And if you haven't had a chance to say those things to Mike, please do that before we're done here today. So I'm going to start with David Siegenthaler. He's right here, and it's a rare treat to see David out on a Sunday. So you are seeing a historic event in and of itself. So, and I'm going to give you the microphone. Ready?
Yeah, I wouldn't have done this for anybody except Mike. I've known Mike for about 30 years. I came to Elgin to work in the library, and Mike was there several times a week, several hours a week at the microfilm machine doing his research. And the first 17 years I knew him, he was always Mr. Alft to me, but in the last several years, he's been Mike. Mike has done more research, recording, writing, and promotion of Elgin's history than anyone. He has written about 20 books and booklets about Elgin's history, as well as over 1,200 newspaper articles. His book, entitled Elgin in American History, published in 1984, is the definitive history of Elgin. Mike is one of the founders of the Elgin Area Historical Society in 1961. He has spoken of Elgin history at hundreds of gatherings, has portrayed characters in Elgin's annual cemetery walk 15 times, and has done the radio program Elgin 100 Years Ago for several years. Mike's research was the basis for our first floor timeline exhibits, as well as our Research Project 231 exhibit on Black history. Mike is an excellent example of a lifelong learner. He has kept a record of all the books he has read since age 15, and that number is approaching 3,000, although I just learned a few minutes ago that he has reached the 3,000 mark. These are all significant books with at least 240 pages, and light reading doesn't count. They include classic works of literature, as well as scholarly works on history and social studies. Mike is one of those rare people who is a legend in his own time. There are many fascinating Mike stories, such as how he attempted to join both the Elgin Young Republicans and the Elgin Young Democrats at the same time, or how he bicycled 100 miles on his 65th birthday, or how one of his students accused him of keeping one eye, his lazy eye, on him at all times. Or how a city councilman took an angry swing at him after a council meeting while he was mayor. I'd like to quickly tell a couple of my favorite Mike stories. While Mike was a young teacher at Elgin High in the mid-1950s, he and a colleague attended a teachers' conference together. At one of the seminars, Mike, his colleague, and about 15 other teachers were sitting around a table waiting for the speaker to appear. After a while, it became apparent that their speaker was not going to show up, and some of the participants wondered what they should do. Mike's colleague stood up and said, "I have an idea. Let's go around the table and each person give their name and where they're from, and at the end, Mike here, who has a photographic memory, will recite back everyone's name." And that's exactly what happened. One of the participants was so impressed that a year or two later he asked Mike to write a booklet explaining the banking system for high school students. This booklet not only launched Mike's writing career, but earned him about $1,000, which he used as a down payment on his new home on Mohawk Drive. The other Mike story is actually a Mike and Fran story. Now, where's Fran? I still haven't seen her. I'm sure some of you have heard this before. While attending Grinnell College in Iowa in the late 1940s, an attractive young student worker in the library caught Mike's eye. Her name tag read, Frances Clark. Mike wanted to ask her out and decided that he would do it in a clever way, hoping to make a favorable impression. In order to get a library book, the student had to write the title of the book and its author on a slip of paper and hand it to a library employee who would retrieve the book. Mike wrote Frances Clark on the slip of paper as the title and Your Parents as the author. He then waited until she was on duty, handed her the slip of paper, and waited for her reaction. Frances was surprised and amused when she realized that he was asking her out. However, she did not immediately accept his offer. She had to do a little background check on him first. Once she was satisfied that he was not some weirdo, she went out with him. Mike kept a detailed record of their 2.5-year courtship, including everything they did and all the expenditures on each date. He later presented this record to her as a gift. A gift for which she wasn't sure if she should be pleased or insulted. Mike and Fran married in 1950, and next month will be observing their 65th wedding anniversary. Congratulations, Mike and Fran.
Okay, next up is Mr. Steve Stroud, so here you go.
I first encountered Mike about 30 years ago when he spoke to my class in the Elgin Leadership Academy. I was very impressed by his knowledge of Elgin history. Since then, I've had the good fortune to work with Mike on several projects. Excuse me. For years, he participated in the cemetery walk and helped out in character selections, I'm not used to public speaking. He portrayed many characters in the cemetery walk very well, and when he stopped portraying people, we had visitors saying, "Where's Mike this year?" And we had to say, well, he was in Michigan one time, and he was going to try to drive back overnight to come in and portray someone, but no, we couldn't do that. I've tried to follow his example in picking characters for the cemetery walk, but I have nowhere near the knowledge of the people of Elgin that Mike has. I respect Mike and his knowledge of Elgin's past. When we come together at the museum, we always talk about one thing that we have in common: our cats.
Mr. Richard Redder, next.
Afternoon. I was very grateful to be invited here this afternoon to say a couple words maybe about the significance of Mike Alft's work in local history. You know, when you're looking at this, just look at the crowd here, you know, the subject, the magnitude of what he's done for the community is so big that it's really difficult to get your hands around it, but I'm sure we all have our individual perspectives on that. I think I'm the only one speaking this afternoon who actually had a class from Mike. And moreover, his influence on me in terms of inspiring me in history, it goes back more than 50 years ago. Now, I wanted to start out with a question. How many of you here have had a history course from Mike Alft? Yeah. I'm not, you know, for 40 years he taught economics and government at Elgin High School, more than 40 years. More than 20 years he taught political science at ECC. And I think we got to admit, for an economist, he's a pretty good historian, isn't he? And, you know, it's the perspective from those fields that he had, coupled with, I learned this afternoon, it's 3,000 books he's now finished reading, coupled with his willingness to step in the ring and enter the world of being a city councilman and a mayor. All those perspectives taken together really enrich and enliven the history that he's given us. So we're really very fortunate to have that. Now, every local community has this local historian. You know, somebody who goes around, collects old facts and old stories and puts them together and stuff like that. Well, you know, when it comes to that, of course, nobody beat Mike Alft. That if you were, for a long time, if you were looking to find Mike Alft, where'd you go? And where in the library? Microfilm, yeah, pouring over that microfilm, hours and hours and hours. And, you know, thorough, you know, I don't know how many times I have been doing historical research and I've come across something, some individual or event, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. Then I go back and I find out who found it out first. Who found it out? Great job. Accuracy, absolutely, rock solid. You know, it's really great. But the importance here is that history is really a lot more than just collecting a lot of old facts. You know, it's putting them in a context with meaning for people. And really good history often illuminates past activities in a way that has current significance, helps us understand what we're doing today. And you know, upstairs there's a piece of paper taped up on one of the bookshelves up there, which is an effort to list all of Mike's publications. And as I counted them, at least, there's something like 22 publications, coupled with all those newspaper articles he wrote, over 1,200, which so many of you probably read, and a whole series of newspaper articles he did more than 50 years ago with a guy named Carl Lair and Chuck Medeiros on the American Civil War, something that was really compelling to me at a time when I was following the Civil War centennial. So you take all of this writing, all of this research, it covers institutions and people and places and buildings and all kinds of things. It's really like a fabric or a mosaic or whatever metaphor you want to use, but it obviously creates a portrait of our community. But I would suggest to you, it's really something bigger. It's a portrait of America. And that Mike Alft was really not overstating the title of this fundamental book he wrote on Elgin, when he calls it Elgin, an American Story. So that when you're reading in here all those good stories about Dr. Taft or Arwin Price or the Dairies or the Watts Case Company or the Ku Klux Klan or all the stuff that was going on in Elgin, you're going to find a lot of good stories about the community, but I would submit you're also going to find out answers to questions like, why did a guy like Abraham Lincoln manage to get elected president twice? But at the same time, maybe you're going to find some answers to why did Rod Blagojevich get elected governor? But the thing is here, you know, we're talking about, well, in sum, is Mike really then a local historian? I would suggest to you he's really an historian with a local focus, but a much broader significance. And if you want to understand that significance, you know, you can start just looking around the room here today. You know, think about the impact he's had on all of us, whatever our passions have been, whether it's community service or preserving old buildings, or you like the house walk or the cemetery walks, or you're interested in the sports history of Elgin, all those kinds of things, whatever they are, they've been inspired and enriched really because of the work of Mike Alft. And you know, we're privileged to be in here in the building. You know, a building which is a really gorgeous facility, which is the result of the work of so many people in our community, but at the same time, would they have been inspired to take the steps they did to save Old Main if they hadn't realized through the work of Mike Alft that we had a community history which is worth preserving and celebrating? And again, we're gathered here today as part of a meeting of an organization, the Elgin Area Historical Society. Well, again, right there, Mike Alft was present at the creation, one of those people who started the society. And with Carl Lair, he gave the very first program of the society, and he was the second president of the society. So, you know, we're here today really to celebrate a man who's helped us understand our community, but I would submit more than that, really understand our state and our nation. And so today, if you go home and you want to read something in the Courier or the New York Times or the Tribune or something, I think you're going to get a better understanding of those stories and what's going on today if you know Mike Alft's work. And so it's kind of ironic that it's his birthday, but he's the one who's given us the gift. You know? And for that, we can't even ourselves really appreciate the magnitude of that gift because it's going to be so important. It's going to be the starting point for all those people who come after us who want to understand their own realities. So I'll just wind up and say, you know, for that, thank you and happy birthday, Mike Alft.
Mr. Jerry Turnquist.
I appreciate and I'm honored to be able to say a few words on Mike's birthday. I didn't have Mike as a student at Elgin High School, but I do remember him from that time. I do remember him as our emerging city historian, and I wish I could have had an opportunity to have him for a class. I did have a bus tour by him, and I was trying to talk to Bill Brown and Mike this morning. The big snowstorm in the classes in '67 in January. We had to add a bunch of extra days on at the end of the school year, and we had to sign up for some activities to sort of fill up the time in June. And I remember sitting in the auditorium watching True Grit with John Wayne in it. I'm not sure if I needed to even show up for those things, but it was the diplomas out there, and you know, you better not miss school here, Pam. Might be some trouble. But it's either then or shortly after that, Mike gave a bus tour of the historic district in Elgin. And I remember being on a bumpy school bus, learning about Elgin history that he gave. And shortly after that, I bought his first book, I think it was, Elgin Area Landmarks, and bought it at the Joseph Speed store down in their little book department down in the front. And it kind of really inspired me a lot about Elgin history and learning about it. Some of you know that my father managed the Elgin News Agency, and from the time I was a little kid, I rode with all the drivers going in all the mom and pop grocery stores, the drug stores, the bars, places that sold racing forms and things that little kids shouldn't always be in. And piecing that together with some of the information Mike had presented in that book, I really started to pique my interest in Elgin history. As time got a little older, I got a little older, and I was in the 1980s, and my career was more established. I joined the board of the Elgin Historical Society and got more involved in this organization prior to their even having a museum, and I learned more about Mike's work, and it just piqued my interest. And I was, as Rich Renner said, I was so in awe at what he's done. It's documented. Every place I go, I know Mike's been there because he's read and seen and pulls together some of the same information that I have. And we both, by the way, owe so much to the Gilboa Public Library as well as our museum, for they're the ones that have saved these old newspapers that go back to antiquity in Elgin, and a pack-rat lady named Gertrude Farnham who kept these papers, pre-Civil War papers that serve as such a great resource for our community. As I said, I think our legacy with Mike Alft isn't just these static newspaper stories that are books that sit on a table over there. They're how they inspired me and others to go on and learn more about Elgin history that's just grown exponentially to all the different activities, the interest in house walks, people's interest in our community. Mike has made the comments a couple times. I don't know if there's a city outside of Chicago that has as many people interested in its history as we do here in Elgin, and are doing things to preserve it. And we really trace much of that back to the inspiration that he provided to us. One comment that I would like to make that deals with his dedication to research. In this past year, I spent a lot of time researching for the Project 231, some of which our display is here. And I did another talk on historic women at Elgin, and I was researching and looking for a lot of stuff, trying to drill down to some things in the census about some of the different subgroups of Elgin. And the great research librarians at the Gilboa Public Library helped me dig into those things, zipping and unzipping files and finding stuff and breakdowns of material that I couldn't otherwise do. But then I knew, they said you can't find some of these things when communities are less than 25,000 people that you're looking for, Jerry. I said, Mike's got it. I said, I know, I've seen it in his books and stuff. And Mike happened to drift over to the microfilm machine that I was sitting at one day. And I'm honored anytime someone like it will even come over and stand next to me. It's a great tribute. I started asking, Mike, where did you get this stuff? I said, we can't find it for me. And he looked at me and said, I counted the censuses. He said. And it's like, I stood up out of my chair, which I should have been standing anyway. You were already up here, Mike. Now you're even higher. You deserve so much credit for your dedication to research and all you've done for us. So, as many of you know, I retired 2 years ago. I spent a lot of time at the Gilboa Public Library and researching those old newspapers. And I know Mike's been there a lot of times ahead of me at some of the different places. In fact, I spend too much time down there sometimes too. One person even came in recently, the staff told me, looking for me, asking for some research help. And he doesn't work here, he's just here all the time. But it's those kinds of experiences that I appreciate being able to be compared to Mike. In fact, some people will come up to me and say when I'm there or other times, every time I give a walk, a talk, anything, I always credit Mike as our city historian, because they'll come up to me and they'll say, well, you're that guy that's going to take over for Mike someday. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, I never could ever manage to even acquire a fraction of what he's done, what he's accomplished, and the reputation he's left behind. So I'm honored to be part of his 90th birthday party, Mike, and happy birthday, and thank you for all you've done for us.
Somebody out there was looking for a chair. No? Did he leave? All right. Well, just to wrap up, and then Mr. Alft, I'm going to give you the microphone because you're going to have to say a few things. But just to wrap up before that, let me say this. Down through the years, Fran has been, she's a really smart gal. And I've walked away from many conversations with her with the kernel of an idea that was a good one. And the other week, last week, whatever, she sent an email to the museum. And she said, I'd like to get a few copies of the Cracker Barrel, that's our newsletter, so she could give them to your children. And she said, I want to thank you for giving Mike a hometown. And I thought, oh wait, but really, it's the other way around. Because if it wasn't for you, our sense of a hometown would just be a handful of anecdotal nostalgia, dripping recollections about the city's past and its history. But you have given us the hometown. So that is a pretty good idea. Thank you, Fran, for saying that. Thank you, Mike. Come on up here.
As I'm unaccustomed to public speaking, you have to bear with me. You know, one of the reasons I became so interested in Elgin history was because I grew up during the Depression, and my father would go from place to place looking for a job. And some of my earliest memories was him pounding out resumes on a Oliver typewriter. I went to 10 different schools before I graduated from Elgin High School. And, I was always a new kid in class. And I think that's why I became such a reader, because everybody else had friends and I had to make new ones, and it was very difficult. And I've been very fortunate because when we moved here in 1950, about 5 or 6 days after our wedding, I couldn't find any place in Dundee where I was going to teach, live, and so we found a place in Elgin. And it was, to me, it was a wonderful thing. You know, when people reach the age of 90, they're often asked, to what do you owe your advanced age? And they'll say, eating an apple a day. That's rather trite by this time. If you get to be 90, don't worry about your health, because if you read a biography of Winston Churchill, he was about 50 pounds overweight, and he sipped on whiskey, wine most of the day, and he smoked big, fat cigars continuously, and he lived to be 90. So there's hope for everybody. You know, one of the ways in which you live to be 90 is because you have to have the right genes. And that's something you can't control. So we're all either fortunate or unfortunate, or our gene signature. I'm very aware of this because my mother had a weak heart and diabetic, and it was my sister who largely became diabetic and had a weak heart. It just could have been me or her, one or the other. And then you have to have a luck along the way. That they didn't have a place to live in Elgin, in Dundee, where I taught for 2 years, so I could live here in this town of Elgin. And I had anchoring at the city, because I came here and when I lived in Des Plaines, one of the different places we lived, and I found a job at the Inland Supply Company, which is right across the way from the library on Ann Street. And they sold plumbing supplies of sorts. My job was a gopher. And one time when I was mayor, Herb, my boss, I came out from the shop and said, "Mayor, you got to see this." It was a very proud day in his life because he showed me the first automatic toilet in Elgin. To think that I once worked there makes me a part of this city's history. And one of the reasons I became interested in history is because I really needed a hometown. And over the years, I just became almost a native of the city. One time I was asked several years ago, but how long I lived here? And I said, well, I came down the river in a canoe with Jim. And I can remember when the first Elgin Water came off the assembly line in '67. And I can remember Ralph Mulford round in the bend in the 1910 road races. It has been a very enjoyable place. I'm very overwhelmed that you have come out to honor somebody who shouldn't be honored for doing something he liked. I just liked writing history. And people have said, often say, you must be rich with all the books you've written. Well, the secret of writing local history is give them away. Fortunately, I was not a history teacher except at Dundee for 2 years. I taught economics. And if you teach economics and you follow some of the teachings I was trying to promulgate, you don't have to have a royalty on books. There are other ways of obtaining money. And by and large, I knew quite a few of them, I guess. Well, I think many of you have stood up long enough. And you don't want to hear the reminiscences of a 90-year-old, and especially for those of you who are standing. And thank you very much for coming in. I would like to give special recognition that when we came to Elgin in 1950, we had been married only about 3 or 4 days. And so in August of this year, we will have been married 65 years. And I was lucky in my genes. And I was lucky in my choice of marriage partner. And many of you don't know her because she's been trying to hide. She grew up in a small town where everybody knows your business. And she was so happy to come to Elgin, a big city where she could hide. Fran, would you stand please? You've been standing long enough.
Wait, they got one more thing they want us to do. So you have to stand over here by the cake. There's 9 candles here. And of course, the birthday ritual is to sing happy birthday to you. So as soon as Laura gets the candle ignited, and you can turn around and lead us. Now, do you want them to blow those out first, or after we sing? Okay, right. Yeah, we're going to set the waste paper can on fire instead. Okay, come on this way. Now, I cannot sing, so we're up Shit Creek. So somebody, Liz, you want to start it out? No? Steve? So people can come up if you haven't got some cake and some cookies and some cupcakes. Oh, I forgot about that. Go ahead. So.